everybody, this is Mallory Flowers on behalf of Jennifer Schaus and Associates, and we are coming to you live from Washington, D.C., and welcome to our Webinar Wednesday series. Our webinars are held every Wednesday in 2018 at 12 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and our speakers range from accountants to attorneys and other industry professionals. The full schedule for the rest of the year is on our website underneath the Webinar tab. In the interest of time, we do not take questions, and our speaker's contact info is posted on the last slide. So if you have any questions, please contact the speaker directly. The recordings are on our website underneath the Archived Webinar tab, as well as on our YouTube channel. All right, this is just a quick blurb about us. Jennifer Schaus and Associates, based in downtown Washington, D.C., and we help both product and service companies with federal contracting. Our clients are domestic and foreign, defense contractors and civilian, and our services range from market analysis reports to contract vehicles, including the GSA schedule. We can also help you with proposal writing and post-award contract administration. More information about our services and upcoming events can be found on our website. All right, so we're going to go ahead and dig into today's presentation, which is how to develop winning federal grant proposals. And our speaker is Jamie Sokolow. You can learn more about his background on this slide here. Thank you, Jamie, for joining us today, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to do this webinar. I want to spend a minute before I begin talking a little bit about my background so you know my perspective. I came to Washington, D.C. in 1984 to work in a grant-making agency, and there I learned about grant development and contracting from a federal perspective. After I left the federal government, I bounced around in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors for a couple of years, and then in 1991, I opened my own business. Since then, I've been working with government organizations, nonprofit organizations, and businesses on developing proposals. For businesses, they are almost always to the federal government, state governments, and local governments. And for nonprofits, they are to government agencies and also to foundations and corporate giving sources. So what I talk about today is going to be based on my own experience over the last decades in developing winning grant proposals. And the focus is going to be on business grant proposals. Nonprofit grant proposals are another animal altogether and would be worthy of another webinar. My focus is going to be on grant proposals that you are eligible to apply for if you are a business. Next slide, please. First, let's start with a federal grant. The federal government has many grant programs, almost 900 in 26 federal agencies. A grant is a monetary award. It's a contract, and it's given by a federal agency to an organization to carry out certain activities. Last year, there were approximately $1 trillion available for federal grants, but most of that money goes to state and local governments in what you and I would call entitlement programs. They do not compete for these grants. Instead, they comply with certain contractual obligations, and then they are given the money. Next slide, please. The first thing to consider when you're thinking about going after federal grants is eligibility. At the beginning of any federal grant guidelines, there are paragraphs that talk about what organizations are eligible. I've listed the typical organizations that are eligible for federal grants, and I will focus on for-profit organizations, in other words, businesses. As I've said, most grants go to state and local governments, and then the remainder go to nonprofit entities. For for-profit organizations, there are a couple of programs that companies like yours can apply for. One big area is NIH, the National Institutes of Health. Many of the grant programs for medical research, advocacy, and the dissemination of educational materials are open to businesses. Two other important programs that are grant programs open to businesses are the SBIR and STTR programs, and those are in probably around 11 federal agencies. These programs provide phased funding to businesses to commercialize products and services. And as you go from phase 1 through phase 3, the amount of money available becomes greater and greater. For many businesses, SBIR and STTR grants are a very good way to commercialize their products and services and enter the federal market. If you go to the SBIR and STTR websites, you will find plenty of information about agencies' interests and deadlines. Next slide, please. A grant generally has 3 phases. It starts off with the pre-award phase, where you learn about funding opportunities and the procedures that are going to be used to judge your proposal. Once you submit your proposal, it goes into an award phase where government panels and agencies will review your grant applications and decide which ones to fund. And then post-award, you will be notified of whether you were funded or not, and you will have to implement your grant, report on it, and close it out according to the contractual obligations that are in your award. So basically, the federal grant cycle is in 3 phases, and it's important to understand them because the requirements within them are very different. Next slide, please. Can we continue? Next slide. Okay. I would like to take you step by step through the phases of developing a winning grant proposal. Step 1 is trying to figure out what you want to do. You have to identify a product or service that you want to provide to the federal government. And then in step 2, you need to do your research to determine if there is federal funding to support what you want to do. A good place to start is to go to grants.gov, which is the big government website for all grants. It will provide links to many grant opportunities and also to the federal catalog of assistance, where you will get all your numbers and programs regarding possible granting agencies and granting programs. Once you do that, and you've identified that there's possible federal funding for what you'd like to do, you move into step 3, and that's to identify the federal agencies and the programs that have grant opportunities that support what you want to do. So what you've done in the first 3 steps is to use a kind of funnel approach where you have a wide end of the funnel and you're looking for opportunities, and then out of the narrow end of the funnel come a few opportunities that you think are potentially very valuable. Next slide, please. In step 4, once you've identified an agency and a program, you have to develop a strategic plan to create a winning grant proposal. In other words, what you don't want to do is simply get the guidelines and start writing. In my experience, writing is the last thing you do. I never talk about writing proposals. I talk about developing proposals because it is a process. And if you don't go through the right process, your proposal is not likely to be competitive. So in step 4, you'll develop a strategic plan to create a winning grant proposal. You're going to identify a program or programs and their deadlines, because the guidelines will always tell you when they're due. The guidelines will also identify key federal people to contact who are connected with these programs. If I were you, I would do this way in advance of the deadline, because they're usually announced way in advance, and then visit the federal agency to meet with people who are running the program. Your goal there in meeting people is to learn more about the program by asking good questions, and also to let people learn about you and what you can offer. Keep in mind that government agencies are dispersing federal funds. You may need a government agency to help you commercialize a product or service or do something with NIH. You should also keep in mind that government agencies need you too. They need you to carry out their mission. They're working with business organizations in order to achieve their goals. And so you want to convince them that you are a trustworthy, competent organization, a good business that they would like to work with. If I were you, I would follow up your meeting, if it's allowed, with a brief white paper of a couple of pages describing what you'd like to do based on your reading of the guidelines, and request a response or a critique. Many federal agencies in the grants arena encourage white papers and will respond with good advice. I did this in my own grant-making agency, and it's a very good way to quickly improve your idea or concept for a grant proposal. So based on the critique, you need to determine whether your idea for a grant proposal is likely to be competitive. That is, it's likely to be funded. And so that's an important step 4. This should happen months before the deadline. Time is one of your great allies in any development of proposals, and the earlier you start, the better off you will be. Next slide, please. Now you're ready to develop the grant proposal. But as you can see from my bullets, it's a process, and you need to have certain things in place. The first thing is to develop a calendar, working back from the deadline, and identify the key activities and deliverables that you need to do in order to submit a good proposal by the deadline. At the same time, you need to register in Grants.gov. This may take a week or two, and that's why you should do it way in advance and not wait to the last minute. Because nowadays, most grant submissions in the federal government are through the Grants.gov portal. So you have to register and then learn how to submit your grants through the Grants.gov portal. It's going to be electronic generally. Once you've done that, you need to create a detailed outline of your entire grant proposal. You need to identify the forms you need to complete. You need to identify the content and organization of the actual proposal. And you need to identify your appendices. I mention the appendices because sometimes grants require many appendices, and putting them together may be as onerous as doing the proposal. You may need to provide a lot of forms, a lot of documents, and letters of commitment or support, and those things are going to take time to do. Then you have to identify your proposal team. It's very unusual to be able to do a proposal by yourself. A team is best. You will be the proposal manager who's going to be responsible for the effort, but you need people who are expert on the subject of the grant application and the budget to help you. I would hold a kickoff meeting to start the process and talk about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and how you're going to get from the meeting to the deadline. And then I think you are ready to get started, and you should try to adhere to your calendar. This is one of the major jobs of the proposal manager. You need to keep the team synchronized and focused on the milestones and the deadlines that are in your calendar. Next slide, please. Out of all this, your goal is to produce a complete first draft of the proposal. And this should include all the content that is required in the grant guidelines. And if possible, you should include your pictures and graphs. These are very important. No one likes to read proposals that are all words, and we all know that when you have good pictures and graphs that are integrated with your text, you increase understanding and persuasion. So you need to produce a complete first draft at least 2 weeks before the deadline for submission. Now, we go to step 7. The next slide, please. We need to do a red team review once you have a complete first draft. The red team review is something that is commonly done in the business world. It's a review by experts who know about the subject matter of your proposal, but who have not been involved in developing the proposal. In other words, they are third-party experts or outsiders. And those are the kind of people that can read your proposal and provide you with a good review. Early on in the process, you need to set up a red team review. Give the proposal to your red team members. Have them do a track changes version with comments line by line, and then send them back to you. You can then use the combine function in Word to create a document that combines all the comments that you have received into your one Word document. And now I think you have good advice. In my experience, the fastest and the best way to improve a proposal is to give it to other people to read. In many medium and large-sized businesses, there are multiple color reviews. There's a pink team review. There's a black hat review. There's a red team review, and there are other reviews that we will discuss. But for many businesses, you don't have the time, the money, or the resources to do all these color reviews. But if you do one color review, it should be a red team review, because it's the fastest and best way to improve your proposal. None of us are good judges of our own work. We need to honestly give it to other people and ask them to judge our work or evaluate our work against the grant guidelines. Identify the gaps, tell us what's good, tell us what's bad, tell us what needs to be improved. And this is the purpose of your red team review. Once you've done a red team review, you can begin to use the track changes and the comments to revise accordingly. Next slide, please. While you're doing this, you need to complete your forms and appendices, and sometimes you will have to include resumes or bio sketches. I strongly encourage you to do this early, because you want to spend the last part of your time improving the content of your proposal and not completing a form. So I would get started on the forms and the appendices and the resumes or past performance write-ups or bio sketches that are required very early in the process. The earlier you start, the fewer headaches you will have at the end. Because as I've said, my experience is that the step 8 can be very time-consuming and very aggravating. Doing resumes, for example, can be as difficult and time-consuming as doing the content of the proposal. And so you shouldn't underestimate the difficulty of doing step 8. And therefore, you should start on it really, really early. Okay, next slide, please. Now we are ready for some other steps. Once you have done a red team revision, your proposal is not finished. It can still be improved, and no doubt it still has a lot of errors in it, because the more you revise, the more errors you will introduce, even though you're correcting many. So the next color reviews of your proposal are the gold and white glove review. A gold team review can be done internally in your company. You don't need outside reviewers to do it. And the purpose of the gold team review is to make sure that the proposal follows the 3 C's. It's complete, it's compliant, and it's convincing. If there are typos and errors, missing pictures, paragraphs that are cut off, things like that, you need to identify them and make the corrections. Once you've done a gold team review, your final review is a white glove review. And the white glove review is to pick up any last-minute errors. We all make these errors, and we all are difficult at finding them, because the more you look at the proposal, the less and less you're going to see that is a problem. It's amazing what you can find at the very end. For the gold and white glove reviews, even though they're internal to your company, I would strongly recommend that you have someone look at the proposal who has a very conscientious and clear eye and who has not been involved in doing the proposal. That kind of person is likely to pick up a lot of things that you missed that could be embarrassing. Every proposal has errors in it. That's inevitable. But if you have too many errors, reviewers will conclude that you're not very reliable. After all, if you can't submit a good proposal, you're not likely to carry out a good grant. So it's important to try to clean up the proposal at the very end and make sure that everything is there and that it's complete, compliant, and convincing. Then you are ready to submit it. And as I said, you're probably going to be submitting it electronically through Grants.gov. So you don't want to wait to the last moment. If the deadline is 5 o'clock, you don't want to be uploading your proposal at 4:45. You want to be uploading it at 10 in the morning in case there are problems. So again, in your schedule, in your calendar, make sure that you allot enough time to upload your proposal into Grants.gov or to a special portal that some federal agencies might have. Once you upload your proposal, I know you want to walk away and have a beer or go to a movie, but you still have things to do, and that is step 12. You need to make sure that you have an electronic record of everything that you've done. If you have had hundreds of documents involved in your proposal, you need to put them onto your SharePoint drive in your company, or if you don't have one, you need to create a CD with all of the records on it. You will be able to use this in your next proposal, and if you're so fortunate, a federal agency may come back and ask you for clarification or additional information. And so you will need your proposal records in order to respond. So please do not throw anything away. Keep the guidelines, keep the amendments, keep everything related to your proposal, and organize it electronically so that you can access it. And that would be your first post-submission activity, step 12. Next slide, please. Now, federal agencies vary in the time it takes to review a proposal. Everyone on the outside thinks that federal agencies are very slow in reviewing grant proposals and proposals in general, but those on the inside believe that they are working hard and working fast. It has to go through a number of levels of review, and so this takes time. So you should expect that it will take at least 3 or 4 months to hear about the disposition of your proposal. If you win, that's great. You will get a letter that announces the award and the next steps to take in order to begin your grant. However, it's very common that you lose. All of us lose. There's no shame in losing. Most federal grant proposals are turned down. For NIH, SBIR, and STTR, they probably approve 10 to 15% of the proposals that are submitted every grant cycle. So you can see that most organizations, most businesses get turned down. Now, if you get turned down, all is not lost. A lot of very fine projects began with losses. Sometimes you have to submit a couple of times in order to win. It is not easy to win your first time. And even companies that are really, really good at doing proposals might have a 30% win rate. In other words, 70% of their proposals are turned down. So one of your goals, winning or losing, is to learn from the grants application process and become better at submitting competitive grant proposals. And you can do this by convening a meeting and doing a lessons learned exercise. Look at what you've done, look at the process, and ask yourself, what could we have done better? In step 15, there's something very clearly that you can do much, much better. Many of these federal agencies that you'll be applying to give you copies of the reviewer's comments. Win or lose, I would strongly recommend that you request copies of the reviewer's comments. And if that is not provided, agencies will sometimes give you a detailed summary of what the reviewers have said about your proposal. This, to me, is extremely important. It's a good post-red team review, so to speak. It gives you the opportunity to see how reviewers viewed your proposal, what they liked, what they didn't like, and how they rated you. So I think that is a great opportunity for you to learn from your efforts, and you can use that in order to improve your next proposal. Now, I would like to say a couple of things in closing about what you can do next after this webinar. Next slide, please. First of all, if you have any questions, you are welcome to call me at my business number or email me at my business email, and I will be glad to answer any questions that you might have. But in general, my advice to you would be to treat the proposal process as a pedagogical process. Your goal is to learn from doing these proposals and get better and better at doing your work so that you can win more and lose less. This is difficult to do, but it's not impossible because there are many businesses and nonprofits that become better at submitting winning proposals. And there are a couple of ways you can do this. If you are a business, you can join APMP, which is the Association of Proposal Management Professionals. Attending their meetings, they have a big chapter in the Washington area, will help you understand proposals and learn from the experts. If you are a nonprofit organization, you can join GPA, the Grant Professionals Association, and learn from them. In addition, there are very good books available on how to do proposals, how to do grant proposals, how to do business proposals, how to write proposals, and topics like that. If you go on Amazon, you will be able to search for these books, and you will find that they will be very helpful. Shamelessly, I will mention that on Amazon, there are 3 ebooks of mine on doing proposals that you may find very helpful. But I'm not the only source of knowledge. There are many, many good proposal blogs and books and documents out there about how to do proposals. So in general, I would say that if you're interested in doing government grant proposals, you should follow a step-by-step process. You should be as thorough and complete as possible, and you should focus on using your time most wisely, because time is one of your greatest resources. And if you are unsure about how to do proposals, you can learn from these professional organizations that I mentioned. You can learn from books and blogs, and also you can get partners to go in on your grant proposals that know this process better than you. Many proposals are submitted that are joint proposals. In the business world, it's common to have a prime, which is the offerer, and subs, because subs can provide expertise in areas that the prime does not have. So that is also a good way of learning to do proposals or improving the proposals that you have, working with other organizations that know what they're doing and that you can learn from. So that is about all I have to say for now about doing grant proposals if you are a company. And I would like to thank Jennifer Schaus Associates for doing these webinars. They're all very informative, and they're all going to be available on her website and on YouTube. And I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope learning about how to do grant proposals better. And so with that, I will turn it back to Mallory.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you for sharing your time with us today, and thank you for everybody who joined us. Like you said, if you have any questions, please reach out to Emma with the information you see on your screen. Next week at 12, we are covering all about the STA At 12:30, we are covering bid protests in the federal space, and at 1 o'clock, we are covering GSA rate increases to the EPA. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.